I suppose I was probably expecting something that was closer to what they would have been doing around the first album. No idea why. Nothing had prepared me for the following 3.5 minutes, which was quite sort of bewildering in a sense, because I would have remixed it no matter what it would have sounded like. But when I heard it, I thought, this is such a poppy record, and it's going to be such a huge hit. What on earth can I do to it that's kind of valid for me, in that sense? Because even if a record's going to be big and you can tinker with it and make a version or whatever, there's also the opportunity that you could perhaps be quite subversive with it and make something that can work in a completely different way with a completely different audience and have a completely different effect. And when people look and see what that record is, they would be surprised that the source is what it is, So I kind of felt like I'd stitched myself up by saying I'd remix it regardless. So I'd agreed to do it, and I heard the track and I was like, no idea what I'm going to do with this, until I got sent some parts. And I was scratching around at the parts, just looking for what I was going to work off. And there's this really beautiful key line in there, which sounded to me like it was just lifted off an old rave record, which it wasn't, but it kind of sounded like it. So I thought, right, that's going to be my starting point. And I ran it through a pitch shifter, and I think it was inverted to a fifth or a seventh. Anyway, and that kind of developed and gave it this kind of really beautiful, evocative feeling. And that was enough in that sense for me to kind of build everything else around it. I wanted to include some of Jake's vocals. I'm a big fan of his voice, and I love some of the lines in this track, so I thought it'd be great if all the music would stop or break down, and then you'd get a few lines and then it'd kick back in again. And the primary feeling in this track was just to make it as blissful as possible, hence the title Carnival of Light. I remember this all kind of came about pretty fast. I ended up tinkering with it a lot. I was constantly sending updated versions to Scott, who's also in the band as known as Baby Daddy. And this was also back in the days of iChat, when you could very easily just see someone online and chuck them a new version. So I was doing that a lot, and I remember the last thing that I added was the opening blips in the track. So up until that point, it was kind of quite a sparse beginning. And then when that happened, it all felt like it was complete. Even though I remember doing it pretty fast, I think the bulk of it was done pretty fast, and then I was kind of going back and forth, and I might have played it out a couple of times and come back and reviewed it and stuff, but definitely got the feeling, I think, that I intended this mix to have. I started getting it again some 12 or so years later. It's also got the longest snare roll I think I've ever put on anything, potentially, to this point so far. So it's a pretty weird track, like things kind of happen once. A lot happens, but they kind of happen once, and then it just moves on to something else. I remember one of the first times I played this was around in front of tens of thousands of people at Benny Kassim on the main stage after Scissor Sisters had played live. It was slightly daunting because obviously the mix hadn't come out by that point, so I was technically testing it out still. And also the band, I noticed halfway through, were all in the crowd at the very front. I just remember looking down and Jason just kind of waving at me, happy, dancing around with the rest of the crowd and stuff. I've got a lot of really lovely memories to this remix. Very, very happy that I wasn't intimidated by its poppiness, and I didn't bottle it. And I'm happy with how it came out. I can still play it now.